Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar, Pros and Cons in an Educational Lighting Design System, presented by Nina Agelvis. My name is Laura Lawrence, and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. Just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a chat function where you can submit questions to the presenter, and they'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. This webinar is being recorded, and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series that can be found on pro.harman.com. We are adding new sessions daily and have over 20 sessions scheduled for July, so watch for those coming up on the calendar. And now I'd like to introduce you to Nina Agelvis, the presenter for today's webinar. Nina is an MFA Lighting Design and Technology student at the University of Cincinnati and holds a BA in Drama with honors in lighting design from the University of California, Irvine. Nina recently designed the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company's 2020 production of Pride and Prejudice. And now I'll pass it over to you, Nina.
Thank you. Just to expand a little bit about me, I was originally born in Taiwan, Taipei, and I moved to the United States in 2008, and I resided in Rowland Heights. And as said it, I got my bachelor's in drama and with the honors in lighting design at the University of California, Irvine. And I'm currently in my third year getting my MFA at CCM, the University of Cincinnati. So kind of going through this journey of starting my understanding of lighting design in high school. Rowland High School at the time when I was there had a really small theatrical program. Little did I know that there were other programs out there that were a lot larger than the one I was in. But it was a very small space, like black box theater, maybe seated a little over 100 people, but not that, it was a very small space. And we didn't really have a lot in inventory. There was a lot of times that we had to fix more than, spend more time fixing than actually getting new equipment. And at the time, our professor, there was a lack of focus on really all aspects of theater. Majority of it was focused in acting and directing. So a lot of us that had a little more interest in the design side or the more technical side didn't really get that advantage. Even then, I still found my interest in lighting, and I enjoyed creating art with light and being able to create this sort of experience for people. But at the time, all I really knew was, I need to point a light over here to get to so that people can see it. I knew the different types of lighting instruments, but I didn't know, color theory. I didn't know what systems were. I really didn't know a whole lot. And so it's very bare minimal. And it didn't really happen until I started going to college, and now in my master's, where I met other fellow undergrads that went into different high schools, that I started to realize that there are larger theatrical programs out there, and it really shows numbers where people coming from a smaller theatrical program, such as myself, tend to struggle a little more. Like, we don't really get to know a whole lot until we get to college. But there are students out there, like the undergrads at University of Cincinnati, that I've met. A lot of them, my first impression when I went there for grad school was that I was blown away by the undergrads. They knew so much more than I did, and I forget that they're walking in with the knowledge that they got in high school. And if I walked out with the knowledge that I had from my high school, I would have never gotten into that conservatory with the skill set that I had. And so I started to realize that theatrical programs with a larger space, larger inventory, and it's not really just the space and the inventory that makes a theatrical program good. I think a lot of it really lacks when when it's focused on the professor. A lot of the times we get professors in high schools that aren't focused in theater. Maybe they have a different educational background and had an interest in theater and decided to go on to the job. And in high school, unlike other curriculums, we have more focus on science, more focus on math, etc. And the theater department's kind of just there. There really isn't kind of any other in-depth class, at least in my experience. It was just, here is the drama program, we do shows, and that's about it. And so I started to realize that, having the experience to work professionally for a high school show, realizing that, you're the only person in the space that actually knows and that actually has been in the profession and knows kind of like the works of theater. It gets a little frustrating when you have to step out of that title and need to kind of wrangle people to make sure that they understand, the time frame that is needed to create the looks on stage. A lot of people, back in high school, you'll look at stuff that you see on Broadway and very little can explain to you what's going on stage. And so I think a lot of what all the efforts that's put backstage, other than just the people that are on stage, aren't represented as much. And I feel like it really changes when there's a high school program that does focus on that and does expand on that. Then you get students that can kickstart their career much faster than others. And I would say that, such as myself, my career has taken a longer educational path to kick off in comparison to others, mainly just with the slower starting point. And going on to undergrad, my undergraduate experience is from the University of California, Irvine. And in Irvine, unlike CCM. CCM is very much, there is that split and focus when it comes to backstage. You can focus on acting, but once you get into the more in-depth side of, costume design, scenic design, lighting design, it starts breaking into, do you want to be a designer? Do you want to be a technician? Do you want to be a master electrician? Do you want to be a programmer? It gets more niche, and you start to be able to have this specific path that you want to follow. In Irvine, it was very much so you are in a drama program, so everyone was part of the drama program. And going into it, I knew that there was a thing called the honors program. The honors program is a way for students who are interested in design to actually get their title onto their diploma, which is why I can say that I graduated with honors in lighting design versus just saying I have a bachelor's degree in drama. And so that being said, knowing that I had to get into the honors program, it was very much so we had to design a couple shows, and luckily in Irvine we had a bunch of student-run projects, student-run shows, graduate dancers that are trying to produce their graduate thesis. So I had a lot of opportunities of design back in Irvine. And even though Irvine didn't have the specific routes that CCM did, I was still able to take graduate courses and really hone in on my career path. And I would say that in comparison to CCM, I started to realize that my technology side is probably the most lacking. But I would say that walking out of undergrad, I was pretty confident with my design skills and my drafting skills, and that was something that I really walked away with. And different programs have different things that they offer, but I would say the biggest thing coming from undergrad was that there's always this thing called, it's like a hierarchy, you would say, where as an undergrad, you don't have that many opportunities. The shows that you design, a lot of times, from my experience, kind of limited to rep plots. I didn't get to create from scratch. I didn't get to play around with newer gear. It was kind of the same sense of what I had in high school, where same thing, had a limited supply and didn't have a lot of flexibility, but instead I got more opportunities, and I had a more solid knowledge on what lighting design was. So those constraints, being an undergrad, you start learning, you start picking up, and as a graduate now, I try to focus on whenever there's an opportunity for undergrads, I would want to share that. Something that if I didn't get this as an undergrad, I would hope that when I'm a graduate student, I can give that to the undergrads. And so it was a lot of the sense where, because I was an undergrad, I was limited and I didn't get to do a lot of the positions that I was assigned to. It didn't happen until later on, where I actually, me being an assistant lighting designer, I actually got to learn what that position was, and I got the trust of my designers. I was able to understand their design, the rep entirely, their cue stacks, everything, and they were able to give that trust to me, and I was able to basically make their lives easier. And that was something that took probably my third year to finally experience. Because a lot of times, as an undergrad, I guess, because grads have a lot on their mind, they have a lot on their plates, and so it gets kind of repetitive where an undergrad gets forgotten, or they end up being set aside because they're treated in a way where they might assume you don't have the knowledge, and that's something that gets kind of lost when it comes to an educational program, this is a place where we learn, this is a place where we grow, and this is a place where mistakes are okay, and we learn from those mistakes. And these mistakes may have consequences, small or large, but we are able to grow from them. And a lot of times you see the pressure from the graduate students, and even being a graduate now, that even though we're told that this is a place of acceptance, and you can have, mistakes happen, and this is normal, you're still kind of pinned to have this expectation of perfection. And whenever you do make a mistake, even if it's a small mistake, sometimes it can be carried off as a large negative instead of it being a positive where the student can learn from and grow from. It becomes this negative that ends up sabotaging their educational career, and it sometimes stops a student from moving forward. And that's something that if an educational program claims that this is a place where we grow and we can make mistakes and be accepting, that's something that should be lived by. And then when it comes to like I said, when it comes to like the hierarchy at CCM, the undergrads take on basically all the positions. I only really get to wear one hat, which is the LD. And so, I have my own plate, but I also have my fellow undergrads that are MEs, AMEs, ALDs, programmers, and all. And so I try my best to treat everyone as equals. If this is an experience where we get to kind of, it's like the stepping stone to what reality is. we try to give everyone this professional environment of this is what you'll probably encounter when you go off in the real world and work in theater and work with people. And so I never understood why back in undergrad, why as I would be treated like an undergrad without acknowledging my knowledge and the skill set that I bring in. And I understand when there's timelines and it gets hard for somebody just to take a break and educate the other person. But that is what happens when you're in an educational environment. We are all in some sort responsible to help educate each other, to kind of spread our knowledge to each other. And so when it comes to that, I feel like sometimes we get so caught up on the deadlines on that perfection and not wanting to make a mistake, we end up pushing people away, being like, oh, because you don't have the skill set, and sometimes they might say because you're an undergrad and you don't know enough, I'm just going to push you off to the side and I'll deal with my own things. And that's something that shouldn't happen. And then it has nothing to do with the school on that part. It really has to do with the graduate students themselves. But going through that experience, I knew that once I'm in that position of a graduate student, I knew that now I had the power to be able to let people just do their jobs, let people be treated as equals. And even if the student may not know what to do or might have questions, it's okay because it's an educational environment and it is our job to educate. And so that is kind of the pros and cons of it when it comes to my experience in undergraduate and graduate school. And there's also other things when it comes to staff, where we are told that like school is a place where we get to kind of do everything that is unthinkable and things that we feel like we might not have the chance to do when we go outside to the real world. And so this is a place where we get to put on crazy shows and design with a larger budget and actually have a fully produced show. But a lot of the times that then gets stopped in some ways when it gets to trying to work around with staff members that might come into the way of not wanting to have change, and maybe they're comfortable with a certain way of how the school has been doing this. So when a student maybe thinks outside of the box, wants to try something that's a little more daring, it can get pushed back a lot. And I feel like in an educational system, that is something that should be encouraged. I mean, if this is a place, once again, if this is a place where mistakes and it's a place to test out what you know and what you don't know, then make it a place like that. Make it a place where if I want to, work with the manufacturer and try and get their products in and create a larger spectacle, I should be able to have that opportunity. And that is where we get these opportunities, and it's in school. And this is where we get those connections. And moving forward, these were two shows that I did in undergrad, and this kind of shows the example of how to work with, how little I had coming from a smaller program. When I started off with a smaller high school, I already had the mindset of that I don't need the fancy stuff to create my art. My art isn't limited to my inventory. As long as I have the equipment and I have the knowledge to how to apply it, I should be able to do it successfully. And so in undergrad, I was given the limited amount of supply. This is what I had. This is where I could go. And so this show, they're both in the same location. One is one on the right is much to do about nothing, the one on the left is Much to Do About Nothing, and the one on the right is Help Night. And this was an outdoor show. This was my first outdoor show, and all I had was 6 work lights. And as you can see from the picture on the right, I had a work light just tied with tie line, trying to recreate some sort of backlight. I had orange power cords and a couple power strips to turn things on and off, but I didn't, and then I had some LED pucks that were battery powered. So I didn't really have anything to control. I didn't have a whole lot of color palette or anything. And the image on the left was just a clip light that you would see in, props cabinets that you just turn on. But the photos still turned out great. But without, maybe on the left, like without the explanation, you might not know that, it's just this janky little light that I'm able to create that. And so it really shows that, like, even though, back then in undergrad, I wasn't given the massive opportunities to work on the large shows when it came to design, I was still able to kind of come from that that smaller program experience where, hey, it's older equipment, it's lesser equipment, it's okay, I'm not limited. And I feel like that's something that that I think, and I think it's a generational thing where newer generations come in and they have the knowledge of newer tech. And some of them, some will understand like why we still, remind them of older technology. And it's mainly just because some of us might be fortunate enough to walk out of school and have the dream job that we want, working with all the newest and latest tech. And some of us might be working in smaller theaters that might not have the nicer equipment. And so it's up to us to know that knowledge of the old and new. And here, the next photos that I have are from my graduate school. So the one on the left is the show called, it's an opera called Bartered Bride, and the one on the left is a the one on the left is a show called Bartered Bride, and it's an opera, and the one on the right is Clybourne Park. And this, for me, these two shows, Clybourne Park was mainly like a full circle. In undergrad, I was a programmer for our production of Clybourne Park back at UCI, and little did I know I would get the opportunity to be in the designer seat for the same show. And CCM has a reputation of, large-scale, elaborate shows that, we students take on. We take on these monsters, and we're able to create, these high-quality productions. And same thing, I mean, without graduate school, I wouldn't have had the experience, just even the sheer experience to design a large main stage show. I wouldn't have been able to work on, I'm going to talk about it later, but I wouldn't have been able to work on like fashion shows and our lighting automation show, things like that not most theatrical programs might have. Most of it is focused on theater, but luckily CCM had a lot of other types of design that I was able to experience. And I feel like each school, each program has a catering to each student, but I feel like when it comes to larger productions like these, we try our best to make things professional. We try our best to bring the student as close to this, I guess, the professional environment that they would get going outside. A lot of times, same thing when it comes to the hierarchy. We either get stopped by staff. Sometimes we have faculty designers, and there might be times where coming out as a student, it gets a little limited where you get stopped. But same thing. That shouldn't be something that stops your, I guess, your, it shouldn't stop you from getting to where you want to go with your design. Yeah, and moving forward, we've made this show called Boom. This is our lighting automation show. It's a class of 30 plus people, and we're split into, I believe, 6 or 7 groups. And basically, we get to tell a story through lighting and automation and video. And Amelia was the designer for this entire rig, and she did an amazing job, first of all. And I was able to ask her sort of a small interview of what her process was, and a lot of what she said, a lot of the points that she said, kind of went with my points as well. A lot of the stuff that it came to when it comes to staff, you know, these are people who have worked professionally and have been in have been in the professional world for a while, but you know, in an educational environment, this is kind of a, you know, ideally this is a place where the designer has a say and can, and we collaborate and have conversations, and you're able to back up your design and argue your concepts. But sometimes in academia, you run into you run into staffs or advisors even maybe that kind of want to change your vision or kind of guide you through a path where it isn't, where you end up being sort of a duplicate. And she also mentioned that my favorite quote from her was that undergrad for her was similar to fighting a brick wall and saddling a feral cat simultaneously. CCM is, in some sense, very chaotic, but I think coming from UCI, that's a lot more organized and consistent, to say. At UCI, I didn't really get the nitty-gritty of what the experience would be when you work in a system where everyone has their own way and you're working with different characteristics, different types of personalities, different limitations, and CCM was able to kind of provide that for me. But yeah, and she was able to create such an amazing rig. She sat down with each of our groups and asked us what we wanted to add to the rig to tell our story, and this was something that she saw in her freshman year and couldn't dream of being in that position, and lo and behold, she is there. And she's a current graduate, and she is, you know, when I first met her, I couldn't believe somebody who, you know, came from a high school education could have such vast knowledge. Yeah, and we were able to work with Martin, and thanks to Brad, we were able to have some of their gear in to create the amazing work that Amy designed. Yeah, it was something that was new equipment we got to play with, and we got to create amazing looks, be able to tell a story that we wanted to as a group. And this is something that, you know, maybe it's something that we might be able to get outside in the professional world, but it wouldn't have happened if it were not to be for academia. And so, you know, thanks to this opportunity, we're able to learn from it, and we're able to create such art that is out of, per se, the normal track when it comes to theatrical education. And that's what makes, I think that's what makes this program very, very special. And overall, I would say in the end, you know, is education in, per se, a lighting design program. If you're interested in becoming a lighting designer, is this education important? And I would say yes. I feel like we should have the same importance that we put in college into high school and give everyone kind of that equal standing of coming into this career. Um, and some may say that graduate school might not need to be a necessary thing. Um, and that's everyone's personal journey. But I would still say that, you know, without the educational route that I went through, without the different types of, like, the different levels of the education I got, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I wouldn't have had the experience that I had in designing the shows that I did. Um, I mean, I wouldn't have had the knowledge of lighting design at all. And so, you know, saying that maybe if I could have changed something, I might have wished I gotten into a stronger high school theatrical program. But then again, I would say that even though I didn't get that luxury, I was still able to get to where I'm at. And even if it's in a different pace than others, I would say that there are qualities from it that I was able to take away. And I think the biggest one is really working with the bare minimum. Yeah, I think education is a place where we should all learn that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. It's a place where we grow, and it's a place where, you know, students should feel encouraged to kind of step outside of their comfort zone without really the large pressure and precautions of when it comes to, you know, money and all that stuff. It should be a space where we get to sit down and create art, and whether or not it's good or bad, it's still an experience, and, you know, we can grow from that. And that's what I think, that's what's most important when it comes to education. Any questions? I currently can't see any, but I can't see the chat from my screen. So.
Thanks, Nina. Brad, do we have any questions that came in? Are you seeing anything on your end? Oh, looks like I have some here. Okay, the first question is asking, once you complete your MFA, what are your goals for your career? How do you think the MFA will help you achieve those goals?
I would say that, one, having an MFA kind of puts me up on the radar where, you know, having a higher education, I can back up my skill sets, knowing that I've gone through it and gone through the process of getting my master's degree. You know, my hope is that I can, the dream goal is to eventually design nightclubs. That my interest is in nightlife. Obviously, to get to that goal will take some time, but I think having that MFA, you know, having the connections that I have from grad school, even, you know, knowing the undergrads and my fellow graduate students, it's already that sense of community and that sense of all the connections that I've had that I can grow from. I feel like approaching different companies and such, you know, it's a way where having the community, I can contact people and per se get a job from there. Even if I had the opportunities to maybe design a show, if I needed an assistant, I already have this pool of connections that I know who to reach out to. And I think having that MFA kind of says something where, you know, I went through the education, and I have now the opportunity to help others when it comes to, you know, kicking off their career as well as kicking off my own. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is asking, have you seen any major differences between a designer who has not had an advanced education such as yours versus someone similar to your education background?
I would say when it comes to that, for design, because everyone has, you know, different levels of skill sets and understanding. A lot of it for me, because I didn't know as much as the technology as some of my fellow graduates do, I realized that as a lighting designer, some, the ones that do have that technical side and technical knowledge, they're able to connect with their master electricians and the, technical people better and be able to communicate and, know better gear and know what's the best route to kind of the best way for their system. As for me, I kind of need to rely on other people in that. I am able to create a vision. I am able to create art. I know a limited supply of, of instruments, but, I think having that sort of difference, it makes it so that I need to try and reach out to people and work with, working with catching up on that technology. And sometimes that can be a little, I guess, a little struggling in that sense. So I think, but I would say that if you're specifically being a designer, some may argue that, lighting designers don't need to know the full spectrum. But I would say that a lighting designer should be well-rounded, and I feel like, somebody that had a stronger education back then, once they're in for say the MFA program, they would have a more smooth sailing process where I'm here to design the shows and kind of build up my portfolio. That's more of their goal. As for me, when I'm coming from a more or less weaker program, you would say, I'm not only just trying to build my portfolio, but I'm also trying to build other aspects that I lacked from my previous programs. So I guess there's that pros and cons, but I would say that we all still end up in the same place. So, I wouldn't say, don't downgrade yourself, but kind of see the positives in your skill set and maintain that positive and think of, the parts that you're lacking as this, as an opportunity for you to grow and an opportunity for you to get more well-rounded and learn new things. So, yeah.
Okay, next question is asking, what is the difference between educational lighting design and professional lighting design?
I would say the biggest difference is there's definitely not a lot of, per se, breathing room, or the best way to describe it is that in school, like I said, when you make a mistake, when you miss a deadline, when you turn in a project late, there's always, it's more relaxed. Of course, there are teachers there that are stricter and would be like, you get an F for the project. But half the time we're able to sort of get away with it and get extensions when we need to. And we always have an advisor. We always have somebody who is, a teacher above us that is able to kind of slightly hold our hands and able to just kind of sit there, look at the production and kind of nitpick on our mistakes and help us fix it before we present it to the whole world. So I think in the educational side of things, you have more of a safety net where you can kind of have those mistakes. You can have a person to guide, and there's always less room for less room for having mistakes be presented to the world. And when it comes to professionally, you don't really have all of that. Deadlines are deadlines. If you can't do your job, worst case, you get fired. And you don't really get a lot of pair of eyes to look at everything you do. Also, depending on what the job is, at school, you might have the luxury of always having this, always having a board op, always having a programmer, always having an assistant. Once you step out to the real world, there are a lot of times where you become all of it. You are the LD, but you also got a program, and you also have to hit the buttons, and you also have to hang your lights, all of it. There are times where you have to do all of it. And you don't really have that much of a support that you can would say that's the biggest thing, is that sometimes we can get a little spoiled when it comes to education because we have everything there. And when we step outside to the real world, sometimes we still have everything, but most of the times we start to realize that some of the conveniences that we got are not there. So yeah.
Okay, next question is asking, what are your most cherished experiences in university working in theater?
My most cherished experiences, there are many. I mean, working with all the students is probably my most cherished memories, being able to, you know, laugh and chuckle inside the theater and also be able to collaborate with each other and bouncing off ideas and knowing that everyone has a different creative mind. And I don't, as me personally as a designer, I don't ever like to kind of only narrow mind and think about my own design. I always like to open up for discussion. I always like to get feedback from other people, and it really becomes a collaborative art. It really becomes like, this is our work instead of this is my own. And I think that's something that I enjoyed a lot through academia, where we are able to feel like a collective and feel like we all contributed to something that is that leaves the people with an amazing experience. And I think that is why theater can be so entertaining. But yeah, that is my best cherished memories.
All right. Did your educational background help or hurt your expectation of the real world challenges?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I would say that it depends. If I only had the education that I walked away from undergrad, then yes, I feel like the negatives might be a little stronger, mainly because my undergrad was very much kind of like an architectural company where we all had standards and everyone worked the same. So there wasn't really that oddball out that somebody was working differently. And then going to grad school where we don't have standards and we're kind of all over the place and working with, somebody will do drawings in this other program and somebody else will do another thing, where I get a little bit of that chaos. That's a little bit more realistic in the outside world. So I would say now it's a little bit of both, where I might expect it to be worse. I might be a little more pessimistic about it, being like, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare. But knowing that I've gone through some of the chaotic messes that I had, it kind of helped me when it came to the professional world, because I needed okay, A, B, C, these were the things that I need to try and either confront or avoid, or kind of make clear that, hey, these are the things that I realized didn't work out back at school. I just want to make sure that these are the things that I am aware of. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both.
All right, next question is asking, you made mention of teachers changing versions when designing lighting to theirs. Can you explain more on how you were able to convince your teachers to work with your version?
I mean, the biggest thing is probably your confidence. The more confidence you have in your design, obviously that backs it up more. Some teachers might say it might be a little bit harder to win over. But majority of the time, if you are confident in your design and knowing that this may sound crazy and this implementation might be out of the norm, but if you have the confidence that you do your due diligence, your research, and your work in making sure that the crazy design idea that you have will actually be successfully placed in, that's kind of the best way to back it up. And just, sometimes it's just luck. Maybe you have a teacher that is more open-minded and more accepting with those new challenges and is okay with trying out different things. But as long as you're confident and as long as you come out with your design and know that don't worry, I have all the list of people that I can contact with to, make sure that budgetary things are out of the question, um, making sure that, we're not trying to break any rules when it comes to architecture, but, as long as you have the confidence and the research to back up your design, you should be able to have a strong ground, the strong footing when it comes to approaching your advisor with your design.
Okay, we have another question. Do you think having more experience in theater makes it easier to pursue a higher education in that field?
I would say yes and no. And in some sense, like theater is a sort of the stepping ground, like the basis of it all. But there's a lot to theater, it's not just isn't just straight plays. You have musicals and you have operas and all sorts, but in the end it's the concept of it's pretty much still the same. You're trying to use light to create an environment on stage. For when it comes, but it's really depending on the person when it comes to theater. If you're more of a person that does realistic straight plays, maybe going into something that's more abstract might be a little challenging. So I'd say that having a theatrical background, it just gives you a solid footing that you have the basis of understanding what is needed. So that way when you go into kind of more out of the box shows, such as like our lighting automation show or like a fashion show, you can apply the same basis that in theatrical design, while kind of changing it and adapting it where, okay, there's no longer, for like a lighting show, there's no longer people. Now all I have is lights to tell a story, and that's something that then you start to react to music more. You start to gravitate towards other parts, and and that's something that you can get from like musicals, because we work with music, but it's different because we have scenery and we still have people. So I think, yeah, having that theatrical background gives you a solid basis, and I feel like having that, you were able to pursue a higher education a lot easier.
All right, next question is asking, do you prefer when a school uses guest LDs or when shows are purely student designers?
I personally would like student designers more, being a student myself, because that just means more opportunities for you. As a student, you're paying for the school, obviously, and you're going into with the mindset of I'm going to go to school to get my training to understand what this career path is. And so, unless the guest designer in some way sets up like master classes and such, I can see the benefits to that, but I still feel like it is more important to give the students more opportunities versus giving an already professional doing the same job that they can also do other places, and leaving those opportunities more for students that are really using this educational path to be able to build their portfolio.
And as a student, on average, how many shows do you get to design in a semester or a year?
Well, now that I'm in grad school, in a semester we usually do two main stages. Two main stages per semester. So we walk away with four a year. Yes, yeah. And because they're larger shows, it does have a longer process. So even then, it's like, oh, it's only two shows. They sometimes still overlap, and it's not just. And this is just talking about design-wise. We still get to have opportunities to either assist or sometimes help load into other things. And I would say as an undergrad at UCI, I definitely said yes to literally everything I had got. So I would walk around a semester with like 10, 12 shows, trying to not eat, sleep, and yeah, no, like it definitely hurt my health doing that. But you know, in different circumstances. But I think when it's in graduate school, it's a lot more controlled and more tame. As in undergrad, you know, it's kind of you have to fend for yourself and get what you can. Yeah, that's kind of what I got.
And the last question is asking, what essential skill have you learned in school that was a total surprise to you?
I would say in undergrad, definitely drafting in 3D. And then this is very specific for my career-wise. I didn't think, in high school I took some animation classes and did 3D there, and I didn't think as a high schooler I had no idea any of that has any correlation to lighting. And then in undergrad, once I learned everything, creating these plots, creating these 3D environments, I just kind of thought that this is kind of just a knowledge that I have, and it will never kind of come back to me again. And now that I'm in grad school, it kind of came back around that I ended up teaching the class. This program's called Vectorworks. I ended up teaching Vectorworks. And, little did I know that I was, going from 3D animation to now I had no idea that that was a skill set that would keep coming back to me. And it's still a skill set that, when I'm getting jobs with an architectural firm or other companies that might need drafting requirements, I'm able to, look at an object and break it down into shapes. And it's a weird niche skill set, but it's odd to walk out of school with it. But it's definitely helped out a lot, and it's put me in a kind of unique place, I would say.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina. It was great to get a student's perspective on this topic, so we really appreciate you presenting for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you for attending. If you're interested in learning about upcoming sessions, you can go to pro.harman.com. And as I mentioned, we're adding new sessions to this daily. I think by the end of the day today, we'll have 12 new sessions added for July and another dozen or so coming up at the end of this week. So please be sure to check that out. Thank you again, Nina. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Great job. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
It was wonderful, Nina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.